After an up and down weekend for the Boston Bruins, it's time for general manager Don Sweeney to make some difficult decisions about the future of this roster.
You're Locked On Bruins, your daily podcast on the Boston Bruins, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, Bruins fans, and welcome back to the Locked On Boston Bruins podcast. I'm your host, Ian McLaren, and this is a daily show where we discuss all things Spoked B. Happy Monday. Today is March 3rd, and I want to thank you so much for making Locked On Boston Bruins part of your daily routine. It's available on your favorite podcast app and on YouTube, and it's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your favorite team every day. On today's episode, we are going to discuss the weekend's action, a win and a loss, plus a big injury that was suffered in this Saturday game against the Pittsburgh Penguins. We will also touch on what's coming this week, which is potentially a season defining and perhaps future building week for this team, with the trade deadline set for this Friday afternoon. They also have a couple games coming up before that as well. Before we get into all that, a quick reminder, you can find the podcast on social media at Locked NHL Bruins. And you can find me, my hockey thoughts, dad jokes at Ian C. McLaren. The Bruins played 2 games over the weekend. The first was a win over the Penguins in Pittsburgh on Saturday, and then they followed that up with a 1-0 shutout loss at the hands of the Minnesota Wild on Sunday. The Pittsburgh game started off incredible as David Pastrnak extended his point streak to 17 games. The Bruins were able to take advantage of a team that was the only team in the Eastern Conference with a worse goal differential. And overall, it was a positive on the scoreboard. However, the game was marred by the fact that Captain Brad Marchand was injured on a fairly questionable play by Penguins defenseman Pierre-Olivier Joseph. It was deemed a clean hit, although if you look at the replay, it was somewhat from behind, and Joseph did take out Marchand's left skate before driving him into the boards. Marchand was down on the ice for an uncomfortably long period of time. He had to be helped off the ice, and he did not return. The Bruins announced that it was unlikely that he would return as a result of an upper body injury, and he didn't come back. And in fact, he did not play on Sunday against the Wild. Now, he did travel to Minnesota with the team, which is encouraging. Instead of flying back to Boston for further evaluation, he was able to stay with his teammates and travel, which is a decent sign. On 32 Thoughts this morning, Elliot Friedman suggested or said that Marchand likely won't play the 2 games this week prior to the trade deadline. And of course, he is an outside candidate to be moved prior to the deadline, since he does not yet have a contract extension signed with the Boston Bruins. And there's some conjecture that the team could move him to the right situation, and if the price is right. So that is concerning for sure, to have Marchand out of the lineup, and his absence was felt on Sunday, as this is a team, let's be honest, that struggles to score on the best of days. And when you're without your second most productive forward, it's going to be even tougher. And they were indeed shut out by Philip Gustafsson and the Minnesota Wild. Now, on a positive note, Matt Poitras was able to play on Saturday after that scary-looking collision into the open bench door in the previous game against the Islanders. But again, it didn't really matter on Sunday, as the Bruins were unable to generate any offense in this game. So it was kind of an up and down weekend, like I said off the top. The Bruins got the win over the Penguins on Saturday to stay very much alive in the Eastern Conference playoff race. And also David Pastrnak was able to extend his point streak to 17 games, which was amazing. It was the longest ever by a Czechia-born player, passing Robert Lang and the legendary Jaromir Jagr, who's still playing back in Czechia, if you can believe it. He also tied Ray Bourque for the 8th longest streak in Bruins history. But then we had the Marchand injury, and with the team playing on a back-to-back, they could not even generate one goal against the Minnesota Wild, and they failed to match the point totals that have been set so far by the wildcard teams in the Eastern Conference. So add it all up, and the Bruins still remain on the outside looking in when it comes to the playoff race. And they most certainly should be sellers heading into Friday's trade deadline. With so many teams still technically in the mix here for a playoff spot, it's more of a seller's market. You should not be going out there and trying to add in order to squeak into the playoffs, get a couple home dates perhaps, and call it a season. They should be more forward thinking at this point. They should be trading unrestricted free agents who are unlikely to re-sign. They could look at some restricted free agents even, and also perhaps some guys who are set to come off the books next summer, including Charlie Coyle and Brandon Carlo. Now, the one big question mark in there is Marchand, who did not play Sunday, may not play this week, but still would be highly coveted. We'll have to see whether or not Don Sweeney has the courage, the chutzpah, the drive to actually make that move, which would probably fetch them the biggest return, or just stay committed to having Marchand end his career in black and gold, which there appears to be a mutual desire for. So that's kind of the lay of the land after the weekend's action. Coming up, we are going to look at some more specific stats from the weekend's action and kind of the bigger picture stuff so far here in 2025. And we'll also briefly touch on the week ahead, including 2 games on the schedule and the looking for a snack that's both delicious and nutritious? Crack into a good source of protein with Wonderful Pistachios. Wonderful Pistachios is one of the highest protein nuts, and each 1 ounce serving has 6 grams of protein, giving you over 10% of your daily value. Plus, they're packed with fiber and better for you unsaturated fats to help you keep feeling fuller longer. I like the no shells variety. It's the perfect grab and go snack for busy days. Whether I'm snacking at my desk on a road trip or just need a quick protein boost, they're always a go-to. Or if you love cracking open every shell for that satisfying crunch, the in-shell options are a classic favorite. Get snacking and get cracking with the snack that packs a protein punch. Visit wonderfulpistachios.com to learn more. Okay, the Boston Bruins, again, a bit of an up and down weekend. And I thought instead of taking a look at those couple games over the weekend, we'll kick it back to the month of February up until today. Because, yes, it was a bit of a slow month due to the Four Nations face-off, but it kind of gives us a better look at what this team has been able to do kind of in crunch time here. Since the beginning of February, it's been every point is pretty much necessary in order to stay in the playoff race, and you need a decent point percentage in order to make up ground. Unfortunately, the Bruins are 20th in the NHL in point percentage since February 1st, with a record of 3-4-2 for 8 points in 9 games. That's a .444 point percentage, tied with the New York Islanders, the New Jersey Devils, who are locked into a playoff spot, and the Minnesota Wild, the team that they lost to just yesterday, shut out by, in fact. When it comes to actually the top team right now since February 1st, we talk about the Florida Panthers and the Toronto Maple Leafs being the top 2 teams in the Atlantic Division all season long. It's actually the Tampa Bay Lightning, the hottest team in the NHL right now, 8-0-1 over their past 9 games for a .944 point percentage. In terms of goals for per game over the past month, the Bruins are 24th, averaging only 2.67 goals per game. In terms of team defense, they've improved a little bit. They're actually 6th in that area, allowing only 2.56 goals per game. So the defense, the goaltending has improved over the last month or so, but unfortunately, their offensive deficiencies have not matched that defensive prowess, as they're barely scoring more goals than they're allowing so far since February 1st. When it comes to the power play, it's a bit better over the course of the season. They're one of the worst power plays. Since February 1st, they are at a 22.2% success rate, which is good for 17th. I think you can credit that in large part, to Mason Lohrei taking over PP1 duties as the quarterback on the blue line. He's been very effective in that role, and I think he should stick there, even with Charlie McAvoy coming back at some point and with Hampus Lindholm back in the lineup next season. The penalty kill has also drastically improved. They are 6th in the NHL since February 1st, 83.3% success rate, and that was on full display, especially on Saturday, with the Penguins getting a 5-on-3 situation, power play late in the game when it was only a 1-goal game. Both Brandon Carlo and Nikita Zadorov coming up huge with their long sticks, knocking down pucks, clearing the zone. That was really a key shutdown situation for both of those guys. In terms of shots on goal, the Bruins ranked 13th, 28.9 shots on goal since February 1st, and they are allowing, 28.2 shots on goal, which is good for 16th. So their numbers over the last month in some key areas have improved. Unfortunately, the wins aren't there to back it up, as they are 3-4-2 over their last 9 games, left a lot of points on the table, and they have been unable to make up any ground in the standings, and in fact have dropped out of the Eastern Conference playoff picture altogether. The Bruins have 20 games remaining on the schedule, and currently they are 2 points out of the second wildcard spot, but a lot of teams have games in hand, meaning more opportunities to pick up points. The Bruins, for example, are tied with the Ottawa Senators at 64 points. Ottawa, however, has only 59 games played compared to 62 for the Bruins. So that's 6 points on the table there that they have in order to try to move past the Bruins and the Rangers, who are also at 64 points. And they have 60 games, 22 games remaining. So the Bruins they're technically still in the mix, but they have a worse point percentage than some teams that are below them in terms of total points. If you look at point percentage right now, the Bruins have the 4th lowest point percentage in the Eastern Conference right now. Only the Buffalo Sabres at 457, the Pittsburgh Penguins at 460, and the Philadelphia Flyers at 508 have worse point percentages. So the Bruins right now are 13th in the conference. The top 8 teams, of course, make the playoffs. So they have quite a few to leapfrog if they want to make the playoffs. They want to make the playoffs, but it's going to be a large hill to climb. Some surprise teams that are ahead of them right now. The New York Islanders, it's very slim. The Bruins are at 516. The Islanders are at 517. They're 3 points back, but with 3 games in hand. The Montreal Canadiens are ahead of the Bruins in terms of point percentage, as are the Rangers and the Senators, with whom they are level. Right now, the 2 playoff spots are held by the Columbus Blue Jackets, who have won 4 in a row. That's a great story. That's one we can get behind with the Johnny Gaudreau tragedy hanging over that franchise. For them to make the playoffs this season would be something very much worth celebrating. The Red Wings still hanging in there despite losing 2 games in a row to those Columbus Blue Jackets. So, again, right now, the Bruins well below a bunch of teams in terms of point percentage. They're 13th in the conference in point percentage. They are 15th in terms of goal differential. They did split the weekend games on the road to improve their road record to 10, 16, and 3. But they also have like 8 more games on the road this month with a very poor road record overall this season. So there was that encouraging win over the Pittsburgh Penguins on Saturday, but they weren't able to build on it. How many times have we said that this season? They pick up a big win, potentially something they can build on. Then they come out the next game and lay an egg to kind of reverse that positive momentum that they perhaps had been building. And with Brad Marchand out of the lineup on Sunday, that certainly affected them offensively. It's reported that he won't be back until at least Saturday. They have 2 games remaining prior to the trade deadline. We'll touch on that and briefly, again, go over the players who might be in play for Don Sweeney here as the podcast continues.
One sec, I gotta get behind you.
Hey, I just want to thank you guys so much again for making Locked On Bruins part of your daily routine. It's available on your favorite podcast app and on YouTube, and it's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. If you're watching on YouTube, please give this video a thumbs up. Hit that subscribe button so that you do not miss a thing. This is a pretty huge week for the Boston Bruins. On the lower end of things, we have, again, this ongoing playoff race, which is a long shot for the Bruins at this point. Let's be completely honest. They are only 2 points out of a wild card spot, but again, below some other teams that are technically behind them in the point standings. They have lower point percentage. They're 13th in the conference, 15th in terms of goal differential. That to me does not scream playoff caliber performance so far this season. They do have a game against the Nashville Predators at home on Tuesday. A game we'll preview tomorrow on the podcast. And then they will travel to Carolina to take on the Hurricanes on Thursday. The trade deadline is set for Friday afternoon. So they have 2 games remaining on the schedule, and there could be some farewell hugs at some point. Now, the Nashville game is winnable. The Predators have had a very disappointing season. They only have 49 points, 3rd fewest in the Western Conference, a minus 48 goal differential. They've lost 2 in a row. That's a game the Bruins should be able to take on paper. The Hurricanes, that's a tougher one, of course. A very good team. Mikko Rantanen perhaps starting to find his legs in Carolina. They are currently 5th in the conference, or tied for 4th in the conference with the Tampa Bay Lightning. Now, the names that you're going to hear over and over this week with regards to the Boston Bruins, it begins with Trent Frederic, a pending unrestricted free agent who is likely to hit the open market on July 1st, and who, despite being injured, is still very much a candidate to be moved, and I would be, quite frankly, shocked if he is not traded before the deadline. I don't think the Bruins have a huge appetite to re-sign him after a pretty disappointing contract season. He has not emerged as kind of a Jake DeBrusk replacement, chipping in offensively. And it's been a very down season for Trent Frederic. And still, there is a market for him for teams looking to beef up for the playoff run. And the Bruins should be able to get a decent-sized return for Trent Frederic. That's a name you're going to hear. Justin Brazeau is another one, pending unrestricted free agent. He's been in and out of the lineup. And as a healthy scratch, he's a guy that teams could look to in order to add some scoring to the lineup for the playoff push. You might hear Morgan Geekie bandied about. He's a pending restricted free agent. He's had a great season after being healthy scratched often early this year. And while he has produced, there's some question as to whether you sell high or they look to re-sign him, but at what valuation will you get? Will he be asking for too much or seeking too much on his next deal after a pretty productive year? Is it something that will sustain or will he regress a bit? Those are some big questions to be asked. I think it's very much worth taking calls on Charlie Coyle and Brandon Carlo, a couple of veterans who have been around for a while and have been very important members of this club. But you have an opportunity to trade them for not only this playoff run, but for next year as well. So a acquiring team can get 2 pushes out of them before they hit unrestricted free agency in 2026. And the experience they bring, the strong level of play they still bring to the table, the Bruins could get a pretty nice package for either one of those guys. And I think Coyle, certainly, you have a bunch of centers on the roster, and he's a guy that I think you should consider moving as well. The wild card is Marchand. Still no extension, a mutual appetite to end his career in black and gold. But if it becomes apparent that there might be difficulties coming to terms on the length of the next contract, the value of the next contract, then if a team comes calling and absolutely blows you away with a package of picks and prospects or maybe a roster player, I mean, who knows? Maybe you flip him and he re-signs in the summer. It's kind of a wink-wink deal. Hey, let us get something in return for you, and then we revisit things in the summer. You can come back and still end your career in black and gold. It's possible. A lot of things up in the air. We haven't even discussed maybe the younger guys that they might look to flip, like Georgi Merkulov, who was called up and looked pretty good over the weekend. Maybe they package Fabian Lysell, who hasn't been able to hit, with someone who's more NHL ready or NHL built. The only untouchables, I think, really are your core 3 of Swayman, McAvoy, Pasternak. I'd probably put Matt Poitras and Mason Lohrei in that mix as another center and defenseman that you can build around. There's some guys who are unlikely to be dealt, like Hampus Lindholm, obviously, who's out for the season. Pavel Zacha, they're not going to trade, I wouldn't think. But outside of those, I would technically be in play in my estimation. Anyways, it's going to be a very interesting week. You're going to want to follow Locked NHL Bruins on Instagram and subscribe to the YouTube channel, because that's where I will post all breaking news with regards to our Boston Bruins. And then I'll come here to record a full reaction podcast to any trade that is made. So please do subscribe on your favorite podcast app. Follow along on YouTube and on social media. so that you do not miss a thing. You also want to check out the Locked On NHL podcast next. They'll bring you the latest daily league-wide stories that matter with local coverage you love from Locked On. You can find it on Locked On NHL, on YouTube, wherever you listen to podcasts. Thank you so much for joining me here today. I hope you all had a great weekend. We had a good time watching our middle boy play basketball yesterday. Came home, checked out 1923 White Lotus. Did not see the Oscars, but did watch the monologue. Adam Sandler was by far the highlight of that. Conan did an amazing job, and I cannot stop saying Chalamet. Anyways, that's it for today's episode, my friends. Have a great Monday. We'll talk to you again here on the next episode of Locked On Boston Bruins, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your favorite team every single day. Chalamet.